Wanyanyekova was staring at the fire, waiting for his meal to finish, when he smelled something strange. Looking up, he saw his meal burning. After a few minutes of cleaning off the burnt sections, he slowly ate his meal and laid down for the night. He had a vision of a few men just a few yards away from him as he was lying down. He focused on the men and their conversation. "Aislinn," one man said to another. "No disrespect, but your father would have my head if we don't return soon," said Margier, a tall and skinny young man about 18 years old whose job was to look after Aislinn, the young son of a tyrant named Oedipus. They stood looking at Wanyanyekevu, writing in his notepad from a distance with 3 of his bodyguards, Adalbert, Alwyn, and Corin. "I'll have Corin take your head now, if you don't be quiet," said Aislinn. "I am hungry now, and this cat T has dinner already ready. We're going to kill him and take his fucking food." Aislinn was 18 years old, tall, hard-faced, and a very spoiled young man. They all had no choice but to agree. "Follow my lead, then," Adalbert said. Wanyanyekova sees and hears these 5 Anakata's men gather behind a large brush in the desert. After 10 minutes he hears, "Evening, my friend, we mean no harm. We're heading toward El Paso, and thought that you might be on your way as well, and maybe you might need some company," Adalbert said. Wanyanyekova smiled because he knew these were the same men he saw in his vision. Wanyanyekova was always a serious young man and hardly joked or played around at all. You would have had to have known him for quite some time for him to make a joke around you. They didn't know that his weapon of choice was the white cane passed down from his ancestors, which yielded the samurai sword inside it when you turn it a particular way, made from elephant tusk, his great-grandfather had killed years ago. They didn't know that his bow was another weapon he loved for distances, which his grandfather made for his father, and his father gave it to him for his journey. But his love for carving wood and fashioning different metals made him an expert in throwing stars and knives. What they didn't know was about to be the last thing they knew. For Wanyanyekova said to the men, "How is it that so many come for one man? Is this the way of the Anakatas? No, I have not known of this way since hunting for boar. As a child, we did go in groups to hunt the great beasts, for they are dangerous animals when you come face to face. So, is this what you see when you see me? A great animal, and you are children looking for a great adventure?" Corin was Asselin's chief bodyguard, 22-year-old, 6 foot 2 inches, weighing 260 pounds, with muscles bulging out of his clothing. He snarled, popping his neck and shaking his shoulders. "Leave this little man to me, and let me show him what I do to boars." Pausing to finish popping his neck, he said, "Let's play little man." Wanyanyekova noticed that Corin came rushing in, so he sidestepped to his right and mule kicked him to the stomach. Then, he spun around and kneed him in the head, followed by a roundhouse kick. "Is that the best you can do?" Wanyanyekova shouted, pointing at Corin, who was knocked out cold. Seeing this, the other 4 men yelled as they rushed toward Wanyanyekova. He side-kicked Adalbert in the throat as he gasped for air. He took out his cane and quickly struck him in the temple, instantly killing him. As he swung around, he crossed the other bodyguard, Alwyn, in the groin. As Alwyn was leaning forward, he mule-kicked Margier. With one swift move, he turned the handle of his cane, revealing the samurai's blade, taking out Alwyn by piercing his heart as he pivoted just enough to decapitate Margier as he was leaning forward. Aislinn, the tyrant's son, fearing for his life, ran into the darkness. Listening to his footsteps as he ran, Wanyanyekova threw a star that landed deep in the back of his skull, killing him. Anger comes over him as he hears the moans of Corin. He quickly drives his samurai into his heart, turning it 180 degrees. He took his samurai and slashed it in the air, forcing the blood from the blade. With one swift move, he wipes it with a cloth as it collapses back into the cane. As he heard the locking mechanism click, he looked for a minute at the dead men. The entire fight had already played out in his mind, but he had to play his part. Wanyanyekova knew every move they would make before they made them. Amazed at seeing things before they happened, he learned how to let different scenarios play out in his head, as he was not much for playing games. But Wanyenyekevu always hated violence and was saddened, but he saw what they would do to him and realized it was him or them. But the sight of blood, which he considers the soul's essence, still saddened him as he stood there. He threw up his entire meal. He quickly packs up his belongings and heads toward Metro El Paso, Texas. Seeing the images of the men's faces and the blood on his clothing, he dropped to his knees in disgrace and shouted, "Sabaoth, please forgive me, for I have shed blood, and I have killed, not one, but 5 more of your creations in one night." It seemed like hours as Wanyenyekevu cried out to Sabaoth before he finally fell asleep. As he closes his eyes and sees darkness, he sees a small light above his head. The light gets larger and more prominent, then suddenly, he sees his grandmother. "It's a boy!" she shouts for joy. His family surrounded him, for it is his birth that he is witnessing. Wanyenyekevu then sees his entire life. It was as if he relived every second until the exact time he fell asleep. The darkness covered him again, and then he heard a great voice. "Before you were in the womb, I called thee." Waking up to that great voice, Wanyenyekevu arose from his sleep and wiped the tears from his eyes. "It is so." The sun rose. Wanyenyekevu smiled, for joy had covered him, but the pain still overshadowed him. 3 hours had passed filled with these mixed emotions as he arrived 1 mile south of the opening into El Paso Metro. The first metro he had ever seen in his life. Up close at least, there were only 10 metro and hundreds if not thousands of micros that he knew of, and only 3 metros were down south: Dallas, Houston, and Atlanta. El Paso was no longer considered the South, but its metro was a gigantic bubble about 24 miles high and a perimeter of 52 miles wide. He had heard about metro and micros from others in his village, books in the library, but he had never seen them for himself. He stood there in awe for 5 minutes. The bubble, as it is called back home, stood there like a transparent, crystallized liquid that seemed to fall like a waterfall but was forced to stay in place with a never-ending cycle of lava-like fluid. He stood there looking through the bubble afar to see the sky, large buildings, and thousands of sky craft racing throughout the bubble. He was in awe of the floating building that stood amid the atmosphere.